Great. Well, thank you, Pearl, and hi, everybody. Good to see you today. I will say that since I know at least some of you were at the conference and got to hear a version of this, I want to give two caveats. So first, I have made some updates for programs that had announcements or additional ones that we've learned about, or because Pearl was able to share the questions with me in advance that I know people were asking about, and so tried to make sure your interests are now reflected in here as well if anyone had a specific request. But given that we did run through part of these just a few weeks ago, I'll provide some overview comments, and I'll particularly point out the updates and places where people had questions, but I won't necessarily address every program that's in the slides. We'll make sure you get a copy of the updated PowerPoint so you can review it as well. But then definitely want to use the question and answer time to get into the details on any of these programs, or I know some of the questions were about programs that I'm not going to cover, so happy to try to talk about funding programs more generally if anybody would like to. So all that being said, the focus really of what we tried to put together for the conference, then are repeating here, is major federal funding programs that have one-time funding. These can be a little bit harder sometimes to track than the programs that have an annual appropriation that might have kind of longer term program information. It might be better captured in some of the other tracking services or structures that you all may use. There are three major federal bills that have passed in the past about year and a half to 2 years now that cover innovation funding. In particular, CHIPS programs incentives that were covered in the CHIPS and Science Act, also R&D funding is part of that same bill, and then the authorization, at least, that created the Tech Hubs program and the recompete programs at EDA. Those actually technically got funded in the FY23 bill. Don't need to get into the weeds on that unless anyone wants to ask about it, but have those programs grouped together. Then there's the Inflation Reduction Act. That included quite a lot of clean technology tax incentives, as well as some funding for Department of Agriculture and energy programs and some others. And then the bipartisan infrastructure law included funding at Department of Transportation, Energy, and EPA for programs that might be of interest as well. And just quick timeline of where we are in these programs and when they happened. You can see that here. One other thing I do want to comment on is that while I do have some programs that are related to funding that can be directly relevant for your organizations or at least states or some of your partners, a lot of the funding in here might also be more directly relevant to the companies that you want to support. But we still did want to flag that for you, knowing that it could still be a very useful tool as you are trying to strengthen your regional economy. So I'm just going to highlight these on an agency by agency basis rather than having to try to make you all worry about the bills that they came from or tracking anything that way. So Department of Agriculture, one major program here to make sure people are aware of is the Rural Energy for America program, $2 billion. So major funding. And in particular, a highlight piece here is that $275 million that's focused on underutilized technology. That funding is scheduled to be available through FY 2031. And generally, USDA has applications that are due quarterly. And there is a little bit of some sense of the color coding here. The ones that are on this more kind of pinkish background are letting you know that these really are targeted with businesses as the eligible entity rather than a state or nonprofit. Department of Commerce, I know there are some people interested in updates on the latest with EDA. And of course, EDA has two major programs that I mentioned coming from these bills. The first one is Regional Innovation and Technology Hubs. So as I'm sure many of you know, since many of you are so involved in the application process, the phase 1 deadline has passed for the first funding opportunity. So we're still waiting to hear EDA's decisions on those. Expecting that we're still probably at least a couple of weeks away on that, but we'll see. Phase 2 was supposed to open up sometime this fall, presumably around the same time or possibly after the phase 1 announcements are made. At least that's what's suggested in the notice of funding opportunity. Congress has so far included very limited funding in FY24. The intention of this program is that it would be around for multiple years. And so there is another $9.5 billion that Congress has authorized for the program, but we have to see if that program does get more funding. If there should be more funding, our understanding is that EDA would most likely have additional competitive rounds in the future. So if you took a pass on this cycle, you may have another opportunity, but it depends on what Congress does. One of the updates that I made to the slides since the conference is that the phase 1 deadline has passed for the distressed area recompete pilot program. That was October 5th. So at this point, we are waiting to see what happens with the phase 1 awards. And then phase 2 is, again, according to EDA's website, supposed to be available sometime this winter, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. There has been some progress on the CHIPS R&D programs as well. So this is about $11 billion across 4 different research initiatives that came from the CHIPS and Science Act and goes to NIST to support semiconductor-related R&D. There has been progress in particular with the National Semiconductor Technology Center. So since the conference, NIST has announced the Board of Trustees for the center operator. So they are moving forward on trying to get that structure in place. And then we're still waiting to find out the details of 3 new Manufacturing USA institutes that were also funded as part of this bill. So this may be an opportunity that is going to be of interest. I know of some of the Build Back Better projects properly, and I'm sure it'll be of interest to even more of your kind of partners or other plans not related to your BBR funding. Alongside that CHIPS R&D funding, there was funding for manufacturing incentives. This has been kind of a fast-moving program over the course of the fall. NIST has announced multiple additional funding streams that are available for different size classes or different kind of product lines or subsectors of the semiconductor manufacturing industry. All of the funding, all of the $39 billion roughly available in funding for the CHIPS manufacturing incentives do relate in some way to the semiconductor industry. Now, some of it's large scale cutting edge, some of it's like current or old gen semiconductors, some of it's packaging, and some of it's manufacturing equipment even. The most recent announcement, I believe, is that the small scale funding opportunity has been posted and will start accepting preliminary applications on December 1st. All the other programs appear to still be accepting applications on a rolling basis. So if you're working with manufacturers that are interested in the funding, definitely time to get involved. And I'll go ahead and pause here before jumping in on Department of Energy, which does have a lot of as well to say that if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat, or you can, if you want to, go ahead and jump in off mute as well, although again, we'll have discussion time at the end too. Within the Department of Energy, one of the major programs that has been announced is this Grid Innovation Program. So there's $5 billion available for governmental entities that is going to be for coordination and collaboration with electric sector owners and operators. So a lot of this is focused on innovative approaches, innovative tech related to transmission, storage, and distribution, as well as grid resilience. So this is going to be primarily funding that can go through states and go through rural electric cooperative entities. At this point, there's already been 1 round of funding and that opportunity is over. But if this is a program of interest, there is a second round of funding that's expected to be released early next year. They're then somewhat related. There's Grid Resilience Program, and these are formula grants available to states and tribal governments. $2.3 billion available over 5 years. So there's already been a good chunk of the money that has been made available from Department of Energy, but there's still another roughly $1.4 billion that will be dispersed over the next 3 fiscal years. So again, if this is an area of interest, stay tuned for further updates there. There are a couple of prize competitions that are also being run, a little bit smaller. You can see here the strategy one is $30 million. The strategy awardees can be, sorry, I don't have it on the slide in front of me here, but I believe these are available for state governments and nonprofits, and you can double check in the NOFO, which is posted. There is a letter of intent that is required and due on October 18th. This one, again, is developing the actual strategy for your region to get more involved in trying to support the domestic manufacturing of clean energy technologies. So that's something important to your sector, and you're looking for some more of that kind of strategy development funding. This is one of those opportunities. I will say Department of Energy has started to, I say this is ongoing over a year or so, but a lot more of the new energy programs are coming through kind of third-party sites, whether because the agency is working with a partner in a partner intermediary agreement, or they've just set up a separate site to try to make things sound a little bit better for branding. But it is, I'm concerned, maybe making it a little bit easier to miss some of these funding opportunities. So you'll see here and on the next slide that I have 2 different links available for information. I believe one of those is more targeted at the Department of Energy site itself, and the other one is focused on the site that's running the prize competition, which is Herox.com. Not entirely sure why they're choosing to do that, but wanted to flag that for people. For businesses, there is a Make It Prize competition as well. This is focused on the facilities, so the manufacturers that are involved in building these components. So there's $5 million awards, so roughly 6 awards for shovel-ready construction. Same timeline as the other one. I will say, while that current letter of intent is due October 18th, both programs, as you can see, are expecting to have a second round. February 2024 is when those are both supposed to be available for that next letter of intent. I went ahead and included the exact wording because I don't know if they're trying to signal something, but the strategies program is saying they're going to have a second round, whereas for the facilities program, they called it a secondary timeline. It's not a phrase I've seen before, so included it here in quotes. I'm assuming it's just going to be a second round. That's kind of what it looked like, but some unusual wording there. Another major funding opportunity is domestic manufacturing conversion grants related to electric vehicle production. That funding opportunity is already live, and those concept papers are due November 1st. A couple of major programs that are either completely through their application process or at least have already passed a required component or a required step of the application process include hydrogen hubs, which I've heard is expected to be announced pretty soon. There's a second Hydrogen Hubs demand side support program that's relatively new, but again, is past one of those deadlines. And then a weatherization assistance set aside for innovation programs. So all of those we're waiting to see. All right, and then moving on to EPA, we had a specific question related to this one, so I wanted to make sure we included it. There is $100 million that was recently announced by the agency for this can go directly to businesses or to states and other nonprofits that are interested in helping to develop and support, whether through data projects or assessment systems or incentivization programs, environmental product declaration standardizations and initiatives that relate to reducing greenhouse gas emissions in construction materials. This is a little bit of a complicated post from EDA, and they kind of have it posted twice. That fooled me for a moment, but it does appear to definitely be just the one combined program. So making the effort to sort through all of this on your behalf. But again, at the end of the day, about $100 million in funding. There is an optional notice of intent that's due October 27th, and then full applications due January 8th, if this is something of interest to you. EPA also has climate pollution reduction grants. So this is funding for states, localities, tribes, and territories. That can be for development and implementation of plans. So I'll try to break this one down briefly. It might help a little bit if you're interested in this to go ahead and click through and take a look at what's on their site. There's basically $250 million available for planning. That does appear to be common across all 4 of those eligibility categories that I mentioned. On the implementation side, there's a special $300 million set aside for tribal governments and for territories. And then there's $4.3 million in the general pool of implementation funding. And that's where states and localities can compete, although I believe everybody can compete in that one as well. There's a huge range on this. According to EPA, they're anticipating 30 to 115 grants of 2 to 500 million. So this seems particularly wide open still in terms of what you can do and what your ambition might be. There's a notice of intent that's due February 1st for the general or March 1st for tribes and territories. And then I believe the full applications are then due April and May, respectively. A couple of major EPA programs that we'd highlighted before, but now have moved on beyond either an application deadline or required notice of intent are listed here. A few Department of Transportation initiatives to highlight for people. The Advanced Transportation Technology and Innovation Program. There's $300 million divided over 5 years for states, municipalities, or research institutions that are interested in deploying, installing, and operating advanced tech related to transportation issues. We had thought that the FY23 was going to open up before the end of the fiscal year, but that hasn't happened. I did reach out to the department, but haven't received an update yet on if they can comment on when that might be available. But the 2022 funding round announced its awardees in May, so they definitely have not done a notice of competition yet for the 23 round. And then again, there will still be 24 and 25 and 26 available at some point as well. Strengthening mobility and revolutionizing transportation, or the SMART initiative. This is $500 million over 5 years for governments to be able to conduct demonstration projects related to tech or other systems that improve transportation efficiency. And we're still waiting for the FY23 competition on this one is done. Based on the timing of the past couple of cycles, it looks like we can expect FY24 to be open next summer. So that is all that I had in terms of slides. So Pearl, if you want to cut it here, and then we can go to questions.
Sounds great. Let me turn off our recording.